I want to ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this question before you answer it. Who are you without your name? Who are you without your job, your title, your past, your problems, your relationships, your body, your personality, your memories? Who are you when all of those labels fall away? Most people panic when they hear that question. Because for most people, those things are their identity. They have fused themselves so completely to their story, their suffering, their routine, their roles, that if you take all of that away, there's nothing left, or so they believe. But here is what I have discovered, not just philosophically, not just spiritually, but scientifically, with measurable brain data, with quantifiable changes in biology and neurology, that when a person learns to become nobody, no one, and no thing, something extraordinary happens inside the brain and the body. The default mode network quiets, the analytical mind stops, the boundaries between the self and the field begin to dissolve, and in that place, in that pure awareness beyond personality, people heal, they transform, they access dimensions of consciousness that most humans never experience in their entire lifetime. This is not mysticism, this is neuroscience. And today I am going to take you deep inside what happens when you finally stop being who you think you are and become something far, far greater. For the past several decades, I have spent my life studying one central question: can a human being change? Not just behavior, not just habits, but can a person change at the level of their neurology, their biology, their genetic expression, and ultimately their identity? I have collected brain scans. I have measured heart coherence. I have worked with thousands of people in workshops on every continent, people who came in with autoimmune diseases, stage 4 cancers, chronic depression, anxiety disorders, PTSD, and I watched them walk out fundamentally different people, not because of medication, not because of surgery, because they changed their inner world so profoundly that their outer biology had no choice but to follow. And across all of those thousands of transformations, across all of that data, a pattern emerged. One consistent, undeniable pattern. The people who healed the most, who transformed the most dramatically, were the ones who had learned to fully let go of who they thought they were. They became nobody. They became no one. They dissolved into no thing. And in that dissolution, they found something science barely has language for yet. They found the field, the unified field, the quantum field, the place where consciousness meets creation, where intention becomes matter, where the observer changes the observed. Now, I know some of you hearing this are thinking, Joe, this sounds incredible. But what does it actually mean to become nobody? How is that even possible? And why would I want to give up my sense of self? Stay with me. Because over the next 50 minutes, I am going to answer all of those questions. I am going to take you through the neuroscience of identity, the biology of transformation, the quantum mechanics of consciousness, and I am going to show you, step by step, what your brain actually does when you step beyond the known and into the infinite. Sekitio3T neuroscience of IDNTY. Let us start with the brain, because if we are going to understand what it means to transcend identity, we first need to understand how identity is created in the first place. Your brain has a structure called the default mode network. Some scientists call it the narrative self network. And what it does is remarkably simple and remarkably limiting. It tells the story of you. Every moment of every day, this network is firing, stitching together your past experiences, your future worries, your sense of who you are, where you fit in the world, what others think of you. When this network is highly active, you are, in a neurological sense, deeply identified with your personal story. You are the character in the film of your life. And every thought, every emotion, every perception gets filtered through the lens of that character. Here is where it gets fascinating. Research from Harvard Medical School, from the Max Planck Institute, from UCLA, all confirm something remarkable. When meditators experience meditators, people who have trained for thousands of hours enter deep states of no self, of pure awareness. The default mode network goes quiet, significantly quiet. In some cases, nearly silent. What does that mean? It means the brain literally stops narrating the self. The constant inner commentary, the judge, the analyzer, the worrier, the planner, all of it momentarily ceases. And in that silence, something else becomes available. Now here is the critical distinction I want you to understand. When that narrative self quiets, you do not disappear. Awareness itself does not disappear. In fact, and this is the paradox at the heart of everything I teach, awareness becomes more vivid, not less. Consciousness expands rather than contracts. The meditator does not fall asleep. They do not dissociate. They become hyper-present. What disappears is not consciousness. What disappears is the small, contracted, story-bound version of consciousness that we have been mistaking for our entire identity. Think of it this way. Imagine you have been living in a tiny room your whole life. You know every corner of that room. You have named every crack in the wall. You have memorized every shadow. And you believe, because you have never left, that the room is all there is. meditation, specifically the kind of meditation that takes you into the state of nobody, no one, no thing is the act of opening the door. The room does not cease to exist, but the universe beyond it becomes available to you for the first time. Now let us go deeper, because there is another layer of neuroscience that I think is even more profound. And it has to do with something called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself based on thought, experience, and intention. Every time you have a thought, a network of neurons fires. Every time that same thought repeats, those neurons fire in the same pattern. Over time, through years and decades of repetitive thinking, those patterns become hardwired, they become automatic, and they form the basis of what we call personality. In my work, I define personality very simply. Personality equals the combination of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. And most people's personalities are locked in patterns that were set down in their childhood, or through trauma, or through years of unconscious repetition. The problem, and this is the core problem I see in almost every person who comes to one of my workshops, is that people are trying to create a new future while running the same old personality. They are trying to think in new ways while feeling old emotions. They are trying to change the outside while leaving the inside completely untouched, and it never works. Now, truly, not at the level of deep transformation, because the brain, the body, the field, they do not respond to your words. They respond to your energy. They respond to the electromagnetic signal you are broadcasting from your nervous system every single moment of every single day. And if that signal is broadcasting the same fear, the same lack, the same doubt, the same anger, then no matter what you consciously desire, that is what you will keep creating. This is not a spiritual opinion. This is quantum biology. This is information theory. This is how reality works. Let me tell you about the most common thing I see in the thousands of people who attend my retreats. They arrive tired. Not physically tired, though that too, but tired in a much deeper way. They are tired of being themselves. They are exhausted by the endless repetition. The same anxious thoughts in the morning, the same triggers at work, the same arguments in relationships, the same feelings of unworthiness when they look in the mirror, the same story playing on repeat year after year, decade after decade, and they feel it in their bones that there must be more, that there must be a different way to exist. But every time they try to change, they get pulled back. Not by circumstance, not by other people, by themselves, by the familiarity of their own suffering. This is one of the most important insights I can give you, and I want you to really hear it. The body becomes the mind. When you have felt an emotion long enough, the body has memorized it. It becomes addicted to it. The cells literally begin to expect certain neurochemicals, cortisol, adrenaline, serotonin at regular intervals. And when those neurochemicals are not delivered, the body signals the brain, give me more. Think the thoughts that produce those chemicals. Go back to the familiar emotion. This is why people return to depression even after good days. This is why someone can genuinely want to be positive, genuinely want to change, and still find themselves spiraling into the same darkness by the end of the week. It is not weakness. It is biology. It is an addiction not to a substance, but to an emotional state. And here is the cruel irony. The very identity you want to escape, the anxious person, the angry person, the unworthy person, the person who never seems to get what they want, that identity is being reinforced moment by your own chemistry, by your own automatic thinking, by the person you keep unconsciously choosing to be. Most personal development fails because it operates at the level of conscious thought, affirmations, visualizations, goal setting, and all of that has its place. But none of it penetrates deep enough to change the hardwired subconscious programs that are running about 95% of your behavior. The subconscious mind is where the real game is being played. And the subconscious mind is not reached by thinking. It is reached by entering a different brain state altogether. A state that is below the threshold of conscious analytical thought. A state where the firewall between the conscious and subconscious mind comes down. A state that neuroscientists call the alpha-theta border. This is the brain state of deep meditation. This is the brain state of hypnosis. This is the brain state that every mystical tradition on earth has been pointing toward for thousands of years under 1,000 different names. And this precise state is the doorway into becoming nobody. Let me share with you some of what we have been measuring in our research, because I think the data will change the way you think about what is actually possible for the human being. Over the past several years, my team and I have been conducting what I believe are some of the most important studies in the field of mind-body medicine. We have been measuring brain activity using quantitative EEG, high-resolution mapping of electrical activity across the entire cortex. We have been measuring heart rate variability as a marker of coherence between the brain and the heart. We have been measuring immunological markers, stress hormones, inflammatory cytokines, and in some studies, even genetic expression. And what we keep finding over and over again across hundreds and then thousands of participants is that measurable, objective biological change happens when people enter the states I teach. Not subtle change, profound change, change that should, by conventional medical understanding, be impossible. We have measured people going from high amplitude, incoherent gamma brain waves, the kind associated with anxiety, hypervigilance, rumination, into deeply synchronized gamma that research at MIT and Columbia has associated with states of expanded awareness and mystical experience. In some subjects, we have observed what can only be described as a whole brain synchrony, every region of the cortex firing in coherent, coordinated rhythm, in states that meditators themselves describe as the dissolution of the self. We have measured people coming out of 3-day retreats with cortisol levels significantly lower than when they arrived, even after days of emotional and energetic intensity. We have measured people who came in with measurably compromised immune function leave with immune profiles that looked more like someone who had spent a month on a healing sabbatical. In one of our most striking studies, we worked with a group of participants who volunteered to have their gene expression analyzed before and after a week-long advanced workshop. And we found that in the span of 5 days, 5 days of deep meditation, of coherence practices, of what I teach, hundreds of genes were upregulated, genes involved in immune response, genes involved in tissue repair, genes associated with longevity signaling. Let me say that again. The people did not take drugs. They did not change their diet. They did not undergo any medical procedure. They simply changed their inner state consistently, deeply, repeatedly, and their DNA began to express itself differently. Their genome, which they believed was fixed, began to reflect their new inner environment. This is epigenetics in action. This is the science that says your genes are not your destiny. They are a menu. And the chef who decides what gets served is you, is your consciousness, is the field of energy and information that you generate from within. Now, I want to talk specifically about the brain state we have been calling nobody, no one, no thing, because this is not a poetic metaphor. This is a precise neurological description. When we scan experienced meditators entering this state, and we have now scanned hundreds of them in this specific phase, several things happen simultaneously. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for self-referential thought, for planning and worrying and narrating, becomes significantly less active. The parietal lobes, which create the brain sense of spatial boundaries, the sense of where you end and the world begins, begin to quiet. In some cases, they go nearly offline. What this means physiologically is that the brain temporarily loses its ability to locate the self in space and time. The sensation of being a separate, bounded individual dissolves. The sense of time passing dissolves. What remains is pure consciousness, unlocated, unbounded, deeply awake. And in our data, it is precisely in these moments, when the identity dissolves, that we measure the most dramatic biological changes. The heart comes into coherence, the immune system activates, the gene expression shifts, the brain rewires, as if the body, freed for a moment from the burden of being a particular person, remembers how to heal. I want to tell you about something that I have witnessed hundreds of times in our workshops, and that never ceases to move me, no matter how many times I see it. It usually happens on day 3 or 4. By then, people have been meditating for hours each day. They have been doing the work of breaking their emotional addictions. They have been practicing sitting in the unknown, releasing their attachment to their name, their story, their suffering. And most of them hit a wall. The analytical mind starts screaming, "This is not working. I am wasting my time. This is ridiculous. Nothing is happening. I cannot do this." The resistance is almost tangible. You can feel it in the room. And then for someone, sometimes one person, sometimes 10 people at once, something shifts. You can always tell when it happens. The body goes very still. The breathing changes. The face relaxes in a way that is completely different from relaxation or sleep. There is an alertness in the stillness, a presence. And sometimes the person begins to weep, not from sadness, but from something else entirely, from recognition, from relief, from the most profound sense of coming home. When I sit with these people afterward and ask what happened, they say versions of the same thing. Time stopped. I did not know where my body was. I lost all sense of being separate. There was just awareness, pure awareness, and it was the most real thing I have ever experienced in my life. More real than anything that has ever happened to me in the physical world. And then they say the thing that changes everything. They say, "I realized I am not who I thought I was. I realized the person I have been calling in is just a pattern, just a habit, just a story. And underneath that story, there is something vast, something that has always been there, something that never needed to be healed, never needed to be fixed, never needed to be anything other than what it already is." Do you understand what has happened to that person in that moment? They have, for the first time perhaps in their entire life, experienced themselves as consciousness itself, rather than as the contents of consciousness. They have experienced the difference between the screen and the movie that plays on it, between the sky and the clouds that pass through it. And from that experience, from that direct, unmediated knowing, everything changes. Because once you have tasted that spaciousness, once you have felt that freedom, the old prison of your personality no longer holds the same power over you. You may still have your habits, you may still have your fears, but you know now, at the level of direct experience, that those things are not you. They are things that pass through you, they are weather. And you are the sky. This is the transformation I speak about. Not just thinking differently, not just behaving differently, but experiencing yourself as a fundamentally different kind of being. A being who is not the victim of biology, not the prisoner of the past, not the product of circumstances, but the consciousness that underlies all of it. The awareness that was never born and will never die. The observer that precedes every observation. When a person begins to live from that place, even imperfectly, even occasionally, their entire relationship with reality shifts. They stop reacting and start creating. They stop waiting for the world to change and start changing the world from within. They stop asking reality to be different and start becoming the cause of a new reality, from victim to creator, from conditioned to free, from the known to the infinite. This is not philosophy. This is what happens in the brain, in the body, in the life of every person who does this work with sincerity and depth. So how do you actually do this? How do you learn to become nobody? Let me give you the framework that I teach, stripped down to its essential elements. The first step is what I call induction. And induction simply means getting the brain out of beta brain waves, the high-frequency, analytical, survival-oriented state that most of us live in, and into alpha. Alpha is the bridge. It is the brain state of relaxed, open awareness. It is the brain state of creative thinking, of daydreaming, of being in flow. And it is accessible to every single human being through simple relaxation, slow breathing, and the withdrawal of attention from the outside world. I teach a specific breathing pattern, a slow, rhythmic inhale through the nose, a pause, and a longer exhale through the mouth that activates the parasympathetic nervous system, lowers heart rate, and begins the transition out of beta. Do this for 5 minutes with your eyes closed and your attention drawn inward, and your brain will shift, not through effort, not through force, simply by creating the internal conditions for it. The second step is what I call becoming familiar with the unknown. This is the hardest step for most people because it requires them to sit in a space that has no content, no thoughts to analyze, no problems to solve, no past to review, no future to plan, just awareness, pure, open, spacious awareness. Every time the mind wanders, and it will wander endlessly, especially at first, your only job is to notice that it has wandered and gently, without judgment, return to awareness itself. Not to a thought about awareness, not to a visualization of what awareness should look like, just the direct, immediate, felt sense of being aware. The third step is the dissolution of identity. This is where you begin to actively release the labels, not by thinking about releasing them, by dropping them one by one from the field of your attention, your name, your age, your gender, your nationality, your problems, your wounds, your achievements, your role, your body. Each one as it arises in awareness, you simply acknowledge and let fall away. You are practicing what the Zen tradition calls beginner's mind, but not as a philosophical concept, as a lived neurological reality. You are literally training the default mode network to quiet. You are training the self-referential circuits to release their grip. And with practice, consistent, daily practice, those circuits begin to rewire. The brain learns a new pattern, the pattern of open, unidentified awareness. The fourth step is the most important, and it is this: hold the space. Do not rush out of it. Do not fill it with content. Sit in the nobody, the no one, the no thing, and allow it to be exactly what it is. Not nothing. The most extraordinary something imaginable. Pure potentiality, pure creative intelligence, the field from which all things arise and to which all things return. In those moments of pure presence, when you are nobody, when time has stopped, when the body has been forgotten, something begins to happen that defies conventional explanation. Ideas arise that you have never thought before. Solutions appear for problems that seemed intractable. A sense of peace arrives that is unlike anything external circumstances have ever produced. And sometimes in the deepest moments, there is an experience of being suffused with what I can only describe as an intelligence that is vaster than the personal mind. An information field, a living, conscious, responsive universe. Call it what you will: God, the field, the unified consciousness, the quantum vacuum, the Tao. The name matters less than the experience. And the experience is available to you. Not because you are special, not because you have practiced for 30 years, but because you are already that. You have always been that. The work is not to attain it. The work is to stop covering it over with the noise of who you think you are. I want you to do something with me right now, even if just for a moment. I want you to imagine, not with your analytical mind, but with the felt sense of your body and your heart, what your life would look like if you operated from this place consistently. Imagine waking up in the morning not with dread, not with the immediate weight of yesterday's problems landing on your chest, but with openness, a genuine curiosity about what this day might bring, an inner spaciousness so complete that even challenges when they arrive feel workable. Not because circumstances have changed, but because you have. Imagine being in a difficult conversation, one that would have previously triggered every old pattern you carry, and watching those patterns arise, seeing them clearly, feeling them fully, and choosing not to be taken over by them. Choosing to respond from awareness rather than react from programming. To speak from your highest nature rather than your most defended self. Imagine your body, this incredible instrument that you inhabit, actually beginning to reflect the coherence of your inner state. Inflammation decreasing, sleep deepening, energy stabilizing. Not because of a new supplement or a new regime, but because the chronic stress signals that were bathing your cells in cortisol have quieted. Because your nervous system has finally found rest. Because the war between who you are and who you think you should be has ended. Imagine your relationship with the future changing entirely. Not the anxious, grasping, desperate relationship that most people have with what they want, the relationship of someone who is constantly checking whether it has arrived yet, constantly comparing where they are to where they want to be, but a relationship of trust, of knowing, of being so settled in the present moment, so complete in your own awareness that you can hold your intentions lightly, like seeds placed in rich soil, trusting that they will grow in the perfect way at the perfect time, in ways more elegant than your planning mind could ever orchestrate. This is not fantasy. This is the lived reality of people I have worked with, people who arrived at our workshops barely functioning, held together by willpower and caffeine and the terror of falling apart, and who left as different human beings. Not because I gave them something, but because they discovered what was already present within them. They cleared the accumulated debris of decades of unconscious living and found, underneath all of it, a consciousness that was whole, that was perfect, that was utterly, magnificently alive. That consciousness is yours. It has always been yours. It is what you are when you stop being who you think you are. I want to close today with something that I keep coming back to, no matter how much science I read, no matter how much data we collect. Something that feels more fundamental than the neuroscience, more essential than the quantum physics, though the science beautifully confirms it. In the great mystical traditions, whether you look at the Vedantic philosophy of ancient India, the contemplative tradition of Christian mysticism, the Sufi path, the Zen Buddhist inquiry, all of them point, in different languages and through different practices, to the same recognition. That beneath the personal self, beneath the story of who you are, there is a consciousness that is not personal at all, a consciousness that is universal, that is shared, that is the very ground of being itself. The great sages did not call this consciousness a location in the brain. They called it the witness, the Atman, the Christ consciousness, the Buddha nature, the eternal now. Different names, one recognition that what you truly are is not bounded by the body, not limited by the biography, not defined by the personality. What you truly are is the awareness that witnesses all of it, the presence that is here before every thought and remains after every thought passes, the knowing that has accompanied you through every experience of your life, childhood, adolescence, joy, grief, triumph, devastation, watching, always watching, never altered, never diminished, never less than completely, perfectly itself. This is what becomes available when you become nobody. When you drop the name, the story, the roles, the defenses, what is left is not emptiness. What is left is the most awake, the most alive, the most real thing you have ever touched. And once you have touched it, something shifts in you permanently, not dramatically perhaps, not loudly, but something, a knowing, a settling, a recognition that the ground beneath you is not the ground you thought it was, that it is far vaster, far more stable, far more extraordinary. You are not a human being trying to have a spiritual experience. You are a spiritual being having temporarily, willingly, beautifully a human experience. And the human experience is richer, deeper, more creative, more alive, more loving when it is lived from the awareness of that truth. Stop being who you think you are. Become nobody. Become no one. Become no thing. And discover what has always been waiting for you just beneath the noise of your own believing. That is where you will find everything you have been looking for. If something in this video landed for you, if some part of this resonated at a level beyond just the intellectual, I invite you to stay with that feeling for a moment before you move on. Let it settle. Let it mean something. And if you want to go deeper into this work, there is so much more waiting for you here on this channel. We explore the neuroscience of meditation, the science of the heart, the quantum model of reality, and the practical tools that make transformation not just possible, but inevitable. Subscribe so you do not miss what is coming next. Leave a comment below and tell me which part of today's conversation touched something in you. What is the piece you most want to explore further? I read your responses, and your questions shape what I create next. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the sincerity with which you are seeking. That sincerity, that genuine desire for something more, is itself the beginning of everything. Until next time, be present, be open, be nobody, and see what the universe has waiting for you when you finally get out of the way.